All right, so today I'm going to teach you some tips and tricks for multiplying fractions. And when we look at fractions that were being multiplied, yesterday we learned you just take the numerators times each other and then the denominators times each other. Now, if I do 5 times 16 and 8 times 25, I'm going to get a very large fraction that I'm going to have to reduce later on. So before you even get started, you can start reducing within the problem. And the way you can do this is by looking diagonally. If you can divide those two numbers by anything that's the same, so like if they have a greatest common factor, you can divide them by that factor and make these numbers smaller. When I'm looking diagonally, 5 and 25 are both divisible by 5. So I'm going to divide them both by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 25 divided by 5 is 5. Another thing you can think of is how many times does that number go into that number? You could do it that way too. But sometimes it's just using a factor that they can be divisible by. Looking across this way, 8 and 16 are both divisible by 8. 8 divided by 8 is 1. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Now when I do my multiplication, 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 5 is 5. Now some of you are thinking, well, Mrs. Hunley, I don't know if I really need to worry so much about this trick. Tomorrow when we get into mixed numbers, these fractions get even larger. Their numerators and their denominators, the numbers get even bigger. And so if you can handle this trick, if you can learn how to do this trick, it really saves you a lot of time in the long run, okay? So I put up in the next one. By the way, this is on your assignment today. This is number 1. Number 2 on your assignment says 3/4 times 1/3. Now, 4 and 1, I can't do anything with those two numbers. They're not divisible by anything except 1, and that won't change anything. But 3's are divisible by itself. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. Or one thing that I tell kids, as soon as you see the same number that's across from each other, just turn them into ones. Like 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now I can do my multiplication. 1 times 1 equals 1. And 4 times 1 equals 4. Now, if I hadn't done this, I would have gotten 3/12, and then I would have had to have divided by 3 anyways to get 1/4. So you can kind of see how that trick helps you in the long run with your simplifying at the end. Remember, in 6th grade, every fraction will be in simplest form. Now, if you go down the page, the number 10 is a story problem. And all of the story problems, I'm going to just let you in on a little secret. They're all multiplication. So if you multiply those fractions, you're going to get the answers. But I wanted to kind of talk to you about why. So if you want to hear why, you can stick around, or else you could get started on your homework right now. I'm going to read number 10 to you. Ian's garden fills 2/3 of his backyard. He plans to plant flowers in half of the garden. How much of the backyard will be for the flowers? Okay, so we have Ian, and he has this backyard. I'm going to make it rectangular just for the sake of the fraction piece. In his backyard, 2/3 of it is going to be a garden. So if I turn this whole backyard into 3 sections, these 2/3 is going to be garden. So I'll just kind of shade it in this way. This is going to be his rows in his garden. 2/3 of his yard is going to be garden. Out of those 2/3, half of this is going to be flowers, right? So half of the garden is going to be flowers. So we have 2/3 times 1/2. And it's going to equal 2 6, or when I simplify it by dividing by 2, it's going to be 1/3. I could have done this, you know. If you look at, just looking at my picture, right? Half of his garden. So I'm looking at his garden here. Half of it is right here. How much was that? That's 1/3. Half of the 2/3 is 1/3. And like Mrs. Hunley, multiplying is supposed to make numbers bigger, not smaller. Well, when you multiply fractions, you actually get a smaller answer because you're taking a part of a part and it makes it a smaller answer. Now, when we divide fractions, guess what? Your answer gets larger because you're actually creating more parts out of a part by dividing them. And I'll kind of explain that later. Hope this helps. See you later.